Good morning. So I want to talk a little bit about, sorry, I just got up, coffee, just finished a red ice hockey game. And I thought I would talk about this. So there have been four games in my life that were game changers. They changed my perspective on this hobby, and I'll deliver those in chronological order. I've talked about those in the past. I've shared those on the channel. I've waxed poetic about them. So people who have known me for years, who follow me, will know what these four games are. Well, maybe not. Uh, Number one was Pen and Paper Football by John M. Stater. Not the full-blown simulation engine, but the idea of a score by quarter football game in which you randomly create teams, score by quarter scores, and then you have an off season. That was the first tabletop sports games that I picked up when I came back to the tabletop sports hobby. I had not played a tabletop sports game since I sold out Flash Football. It was like 2023 or 2003. And I think there was a couple of moments like 2006 that I tried Stratomatic but they were like I'd play a Stratomatic game of football once every 9 months or something like that in solo. But pen and paper football literally brought me back to tabletop gaming and changed what I thought tabletop sports gaming was. I grew up with, of course, Status Pro, Title Bout, traditional kind of tabletop sports games, right? Dice and chart, all replay based on stats, based on real players, supposed to give us decent results, APA and, all those things. And John M. Stater dared to say this, and I was hooked. The second that came along after that was Grid Zone Turf Wars by Stone Mountain Press, Gary Brown's game. And many of you, again, who know me have known me in the last 15 years I've been on YouTube. Um, that game became an obsession. I played, I don't know how many, 600 games total in my short career of Grid Zone. I say short because when I discovered it, it's basically all I did. And I was running a 1940s league offline that I didn't share the private league, and then I had a ongoing online league with friends, humans who owned other humans who owned teams in the league, and it that that was, I would say, one of the top three greatest experiences in my life for tabletop gaming, period, including board games and role playing experiences. And no doubt, Grid Zone was somewhat of an addiction, I have to admit. And it's been difficult to go back to it. I have it. I have all my Grid Zone stuff. It is safely packed and secured. Every once in a while, I'll dig it out. I'll play a game. But that game, I was basically for all intents and purposes, I was addicted, and it was a huge game changer. Now, I had invented Flash Football in '96, and Flash Football evolved from '96 to 2001, in which I was selling it, and it had fictional teams and a fictional career mode. So it wasn't as if I had not invented a career mode back in '96, right? But I was still attempting to create, in a way, a fast play solitaire football game. And the units on the field were units. They weren't necessarily individual players. And Gary Brown's decision to make it a seven-man football, and having every individual starting player impact play on any given snap, and then those guys age and leave as free agents and retire, and new guys, you create new. It was just a fantastic experience. And Grid Zone coupled, in a way, a moderate speed game. I won't say fast play, but in about 25 rolls, you can resolve a complete game of Grid Zone football. It is a completely unique football sport, but I could envision everything as I've seen Jackrabbit football before. I've seen seven-man football, eight-man football. I played in flag football leagues that were eight-man football, so it was not difficult to imagine what this sport looked like. If you've seen arena football, you know exactly what the sport looked like on a real field as opposed to a tiny hockey rink, right? And so Grid Zone felt like a more genuine version of what professional seven-man football could look like if we played it on a real football field and scored it differently. And just everything about Gary's invention was genius, was superb. And then the gameplay, the automated solo play calling, it 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 quite literally changed my again my total perspective on what we can be doing on a tabletop. It doesn't have to be yet another replay of the 1984 uh, Dolphins. Can Dan Marino get his 5,000 yards and 48 touchdown passes? You know, so again, it's just this liberating event that had longevity. I mean, this thing has longevity. It's endless, infinite, and you build your own worlds. Okay. Third, dead ball, baseball with dice. I'm not a huge tabletop baseball gamer. I had Stratomatic, I had Apple. I had worked on my own baseball game, which was a simple fast play, inning by inning score game. But Dead Ball Baseball with Dice by W.M. Akers blew my mind and instantly became my go-to baseball game. And a self-contained in a book was this brilliantly written narrative about a version of baseball going. And the first book I bought was the 1909 set. It was completely contained, paperback, and it went back to early baseball and career modes, accurate gameplay, simple gameplay, uses all kinds of dice instead of one set of dice. And of course, the players are rated and they age, et cetera, et cetera. And then he had a pennant race, fast play, and everything self-contained in one little paperback book, which led me to buy baseball, Dead Ball Baseball with Dice, the hardback, and eventually Baseball with Dice, the hardback deluxe. So I own all three of those books. 1909 is still my favorite version, but it was the first version. It was the one that grabbed me and sucked me in. And and it made me, in a way, a baseball fan, really, with my own players, my own teams, um, and phenomenal. Um, and again, changed my idea of how a sports game can be presented in a book, right? Pen and paper did too, but a career sports game that was full baseball sim, batter by batter, tracking it like a baseball game with brilliantly written narrative. I went, oh my God, this is a game changer. This sets a new standard of what we should expect from designers and developers in the publishing space. And phenomenal, right? And then recently, Legacy of the Cage. That would be fourth on this Mount Rushmore for me of games that have changed my thoughts on the space, that have changed my perspective on tabletop sports gaming. It is a phenomenally rich, detailed, and deep combat sports game that is couched in a career, right? It isn't just, hey, this is grab two fighters and let's just have a boxing match to see if Tyson can beat Ali. This is dedicated to the idea that you're creating fighters and you're going to fight their legacy. You're going to fight out their career. And then dedicated to it being tactical head-to-head play with artificial intelligent roll grids for the enemy boxers, so you can play solo. And then, of course, I've gone as far as automating my own grid for my own fighter, Bodoni. I just haven't customized it. I'm using the wrestler grid, and the depth in which this looks like a role-playing game. It's laid out like a role-playing game. You create a boxer like you create a role-playing character, and the depth and the nuance of all the detail is so rich. Yet once you get playing it, it's pretty easy to play. And to the point that we customize infinite fighters through skills, through art, through their attribute scores. Yet they match up for play and they're converted to a simple percentage roll. It is a masterwork. And it has changed again. All right, well, I don't know if I say change. Yeah, it has. It's changed what I think combat sports games can be and should be. Title Bout was my favorite tabletop sports game as a kid. I played it solo. I would sit with a friend and we would score it together, but we didn't play Title Bout as a head-to-head game. We would sit together on the same side of the table and we would narrate the fight and we would track the stats and we'd pick, I'd pick a pair of boxers I wanted to see, or I'd pick a boxer and Bill and Jeff would pick a boxer. And then, but Status Pro was our favorite head-to-head games, basketball and baseball. But, and then came along other boxing games that are also amazing, but they do the same thing, right? You just grab a couple of boxers, you roll some dice, you check a chart maybe, and it's kind of a derivative of Title Bout, right? Title Bout was the first and the most glorious boxing game I think the tabletop space had ever seen. And of course, we've seen great boxing games come in the modern era that have attempted, I think, to recreate that to some degree without using fast action cards, so to speak, right? Um, but they didn't change the space. They were just another version of boxing. And I've had, like I said, I think I own 9 or 12 boxing games. So when I got Legacy of the Cage, it's a complete and utter game changer. The um, the actual tactical choices, even if I'm rolling them randomly, change the idea of what's happening in those 30-second segments. How you score it, how you take damage, how you land critical blows, how you transition from standing to prone, into grappling, out of grappling. But then there's the career stuff, the hype scale, your actual experience tier. And then the thing that has been a magic is the longevity score. My fighter in 5 fights is already down to 34 longevity out of 50. I can see already if he continues to lose and he continues to have injuries, his career is going to be a short one. He might only make 15, maybe 20 fights in his career if he's lucky, if he doesn't start winning and he avoids injury. And this piece, that piece, it just changes everything about this idea of a simulated combat sport that is tactical with infinite types of fighters with skills and rated your fighters rated for height and longevity and an experience tier. It changes what we should expect from tabletop boxing games, in my opinion, right? At least career-based boxing games. And it has the gall to demand that this is a tactical game. I'm going for a strike, you're going for a takedown, right? And depending on my success, I can cause damage, I can score a point, but you could take me down, and now you're on top, and right? And we have another, now we're grappling, right? And now I can try to escape, I can strike back, I can try to reverse. You're going to try to strike or submit. It is, it really does in many ways remind me of a simulation style role-playing combat system, but it's faster and really easy to use. I know he's working on version 2. Matt's working on version 2, and I know he's adding a lot of features that fans have said they'd like to see in the game. Uh, I'm telling you, version 1 would be fine for me. I'll play this until, Kingdom Come. Um, I do believe, hopefully in version 2, he doesn't overcomplicate it and doesn't add too much work for the player for what it is, right? Now, with all that said, so what does this mean? Well, nothing. It means, again, I believe we're in the golden age of tabletop gaming because we have available to us small companies, small developers. We also have PDFs and ebooks, and we also have availability of stuff that we just didn't have a lot of choices as a kid. You had a catalog from Avalon Hill, you had a game store you could walk into, but the idea that you were going to meet Frank Johnson, and Frank Johnson had made a remarkable soccer game or something, good luck, right? Unless he was your next door neighbor or something, right? But this leads me to, what do all those games have in common? Well, career elements, fictional, easy to play, easy to learn, easy to track, and they have career elements. They have feet that can walk forever and ever and ever. They are accurate of the sport, even if they are not attempting to recreate the 1984 Miami Dolphins, right? Or the 1972 Dolphins, or whatever you want to say. So they liberate you from this mindset that somehow tabletop sports is supposed to be a regurgitation of what we already know, what we've already seen, and what we've already enjoyed, right? We're liberated from having to play the MLB over and over and over, etc. Right? We are liberated to create a high school league. We're liberated to create our own fictional pro leagues. We're liberated to create our favorite, you know, boxers, and and the universe around them, whatever the case may be. And with all that said and done, those are the things that also inspire you to write. And I've said it before, I very much love career-based games because the narrative that comes out of the every moment, right? We're building the team. There's a narrative in the building of a team. Then there's a narrative in how they fit into this league. There's a narrative of the league, right? And then there's a narrative of who runs this league and why is it built. And then there's the actual games, which create the ebb and flow through the season. And then that becomes the narrative of the season. And then invariably it becomes the narrative of the playoffs and the narrative of the champion and then the narrative of the off season. And then we do it again. And this was important to me in pen and paper football, but it became huge in grid zone as I could not wait to get through a season. I was enjoying the game, but I really wanted to get through the season. I wanted the narrative of the offseason, and then I wanted the narrative of, man, this is going to be great fun to start another season and see if Columbia, if the Columbia Coolers can't find a way to win back-to-back champs or whatever the case may be, or if Dayton's new quarterback can change their fate. These are just things that you don't get when you choose to play the 1983 NFL again, right? Okay, it's the Raiders. If the Raiders lose and they don't make it to the Super Bowl, I'm always going to be disappointed. It's just not going to feel right. If the Raiders win and get it all, and I'm like, hey, great, but they were supposed to do that. And these are the problems for me for replay games. If Marcus Allen in '83 gets 1,800 yards rushing, I'm gonna go, that's amazing. He's great, but that's way off the mark. He didn't do that. And then I'm going to question the validity of the game. And then if Marcus Allen doesn't get 600 yards rushing, the Raiders are 8-8. I'm going to say, what the hell? Well, the validity of the game, and I'm disappointed. And so I'm liberated from replay. I was liberated from replay probably after I left PC gaming because I was replaying in Dave Cook action PC games. I was replaying in Lance Hafner DOS games. I thought for PCs to play full seasons and full season replays was the perfect medium for that. I could not imagine playing 274 games in Stratomatic and tracking everything. It just never crossed my mind. I wasn't about to do it. So Stratomatic became fun one-offs or tournaments or whatever, which I still do because I have zero interest in the idea of either being disappointed that it didn't come out the way I thought it should, or lukewarm about the fact that, hey, it was accurate. Oh, whoops. Well, it was accurate. Okay, that's the best I can say about it. Now what? Well, I guess I'll buy the 1989 season and do that, right? So this has led to things, and this started for me again over the last 8 years. People who followed me will see what transpired from that disappointment. Stuff like game-winning drive football became my history replay game because it was fast. I could play it quickly. It didn't matter. All that mattered was who's winning and the scoring, and it was accurate. Game-winning drive football baked in was this level of accuracy, but I could play it in just a few minutes and I got what I wanted. I wanted to see the 1954 season, and I could do it quickly, and I could still see. And yes, could there be disappointment that a team didn't do as well as I thought they should, or would there be that feeling of, oh well, of course, the Cleveland Browns won because they did in real life. Well, it's a replay game; they should, right? So, but I moved away from stat keeping, and I moved away from this idea of trying to simulate real football or real basketball or whatever. And of course, that led to me enjoying big sims still, like second season and app off football. But ultimately, I found myself that wanting an hour and a half to play one game of football. I've outgrown it. As a mature adult, as a 50-something-year-old man, I was ultimately outgrowing it and still enjoying it in certain ways, tournaments and things like that. But it led me to say, how can I have the best of both worlds? And I started to work on stuff like Big Country Football, where I can simulate a game of football quickly, but I also get every snap of the game. and I'm done in 20 minutes, right? And it is free of this idea of having to be replay game, right? So what does this lead to, though? What does career-based games lead to? And this is a legitimate issue, and I'm going to talk about this. Although this is really, in a way, a video on how I've progressed. There's one thing that always haunts me when I start a new career in any of my career-based games, and that is entropy. Um, I spent all this time creating these teams and then placing these players on the roster and determining who they are. And then you set out to play the games. And invariably, what happens once you crack the can open, uh, entropy happens, right? The actual season league changes, it modifies. So we try to make narrative of that, right? The off season, oh, the shortstop retired for Durango. Dang, they got to get a new shortstop or whatever. So we have that narrative that fills the gaps. But what we have, or I suffer. I will say me. I don't think a lot of my peers who play career based. Ironically, everything that I create is career based. It's generally set in fictional environments that you can create. But invariably, I have this problem with the entropy that comes from it, right? My who I created is Tony Bedoni changed changes literally from fight to fight. Not only does he change if I'm investing in him, which is good, it's a career. He's supposed to be getting stronger as he builds experience and therefore can fight and maybe win a championship. Duh. That's that's the game changer. That's one of the game changers I'm talking about. But invariably, Tony Bedoni is never the same for long. And there is something about that that is somewhat unnerving to a guy who who likes stability. Grid zone was a never-ending entropy, but not in a bad way. It's just whatever San Antonio entered the league as, in 4 years, San Antonio would not be the same team. And that's a good thing. I mean, again, that's the game changer portion of these career games. And it's wonderful. But at the same time, I'm torn. There are times where the entropy of it and tracking of it can be destabilizing as far as what I, where I envisioned of something and where it's ultimately evolving into. And again, those are pros, but for somebody like me who can be a little bit OCD, that can also be a problem, right? Okay. So with that said, uh, in the last 2 years, I have written and published and gotten my games out there, which are, of course, meant for you to create your own leagues, your own teams, your own players, and play out careers. And so those are done, and I'm proud of those, and I play them myself, etc. And then comes along John's games, Drive Time Football in the last year, and Baseline Basketball, and Red Ice Hockey. And what do I learn from John's games? That I can have that ebb and flow of the actual game. I can have enough highlights that I get the feeling of the team, and I'm able to conclude those games in about 15 minutes. So it's a little better than a fast play game, but it doesn't take me long to play out a week. And finally, zero entropy, right? I can play out however I want, either replay an entire season, or I can set up a tournament, or right. We all know this. We all have done this, right? Guys, the guys that don't want to try to replay an entire season of baseball, that you handpick your favorite teams and do a tournament of, yeah, King of the Hill tournament or whatever. That's nothing new, right? Boxing, you pick your top 10 heavyweights and legends of boxing, and then you say, let's find out who the best is, and we fight off, right? But it's self-contained on those cards, right? Who that team is, clean, neat on that card, and their what they're about, and then hockey with all the players and the rosters. And I know there are friends in the community that are like, you know what, I want to see fictional team creation and a way to have a career with drive time football. And so John did that, and I think it's effective and it works. And there are those who want to see him do it with baseball, basketball, and with hockey. And I think he can do that if he wants to. But I don't play those games for career. I play those games for exactly the reason I refuse to play Stratomatic hockey anymore, why I refuse to play at-ball baseball, why I refuse to play status pro football, right? Because I don't want to spend my time in an 90 minute to a 2 hour session for one game and then try to somehow play an entire season out or one team's season out or whatever. They are my option to play the 1984 Dolphins and see what gives. The 1985 Monday night game between the Dolphins and the Bears, right? I have that opportunity. Or take the 85 Dolphins and just play through that season and see if they can't get back to the Super Bowl and face the Bears in the Super Bowl. What if scenarios? And there's zero entropy. There's zero wrestling with cards. I don't have to worry about injuries. Apple, I've got to have my lineup, which is awesome, but I got to have this lineup. I got to stack them up. And then, oh, by the way, an injury pops up. I got to shuffle them out, put them back in. This entropy that happens when I play a game with injuries, for instance. Grid Zone, he dealt with injuries with a very simple marker. Bang, dude injured. Put a yellow marker on it to remind you that he's now at a negative. Bang, he's out. Put a red marker on that position to let you know that it's literally a zero now has replaced him as a backup. And it kept this kind of shuffling of stuff and this entropy of what's happening in the game compartmentalized, right? And so this is important to me, right? As I discover at 55, well, what kind of gamer am I? Well, I love career games. I love the ebb and flow. I love watching the development and the long-term evolution of teams and leagues. But I also suffer with this desire not to see total entropy. But the minute we drop the dice in a career-based game and it means changes to the team, wow, that starts this entropy that sometimes for a guy like me is a lot of work. I'm tracking everything in my notebooks, and I do that because I want to know the narrative. I do that because I also want to flavor my commentary and the context of the next game. So when Tony Bedoni not only gets knocked out in his fourth fight, but he suffers a major injury which affects him for the next fight. And it changed him for the next fight. That's amazing. And I live for that. It's like, oh my God, I've never had this. I've never had a fighter recover from a hand injury, but his grappling is still greatly affected for the next fight. He's got to fight with a hand that isn't fully healed up, and his power is affected. And this is something that's game changer. This is something that is not happening in other tabletop games, and it's brilliant. But there's this entropy of me tracking it so I can share it in context for the fight. And that's awesome, but at the same time, that's work, right? And so when I play a game like Drive Time Football and I say, hey, what's the entropy occurring in Drive Time Football? My American Football League 1960 playthrough that I'm doing with an original schedule. So I'm not replaying the 1960 schedule. I'm playing the league with an original schedule. And I'm in week, I don't know where I'm at now in that week 4 or 5, and it's unbelievable. The entropy, the only entropy I have to deal with is the schedule as it evolves. And then, of course, tracking points for and points against. And if I'm tracking the box score, touchdowns running, touchdowns for passing, interceptions, and things like that, then I've got this data to collect for the heck of it, or I've got this data to collect for context. If I want to talk about who's leading the league in touchdown passes, I have that data. If I want to do that, I'm not required to. All I've got to do is play the games, track the wins and losses, and track the schedule. And then the entropy is the schedule itself, as the schedule is affected by every result. And I know nobody in our hobby discusses the entropy of our tabletop gaming, but it is. We have this pristine league set up, and we have this pristine schedule set up. And the minute I start dropping dice and resolving games, I'm creating entropy. And that is amazing for the positive. I mean, because the positive is we got to get results. We want to get through the end of it. But in a career game, we're adding more entropy. We're adding injuries, we're tracking it, whatever the case may be, right? And so that's overwhelming for me in a game like Dead Ball for Dice. If I want to have a 20-team league with 25-man rosters, that is a whole lot of stuff that that happens every game, every week, and creates this level of entropy that is very often for me at this age, 55, I don't want to endure, right? So there's a side of me that loves it, but it cuts into my joy of sitting down to play the games. If that makes sense. Maybe I'm not making sense, but this is why John's Drive Time Football hit me at the right time, in the right headspace. Holy cow, self-contained, All this information's on a card. It's accurate. It's fast, and it gives me a sense of the game, ebb and flow, right? And the baseline basketball, bar none, basketball and hockey are for me the two best on the planet, right? That's the best base basketball game I have ever played on tabletop, bar none. And but red ice hockey is the best hockey game on the tabletop I've ever played. Now, obviously, that's going to depend on what you're looking for. Are you looking for setting your lines up? Are you looking for head-to-head play? Are you looking to track every stat and the lines and points scored and who's getting, obviously those you're going to want, you're going to want hockey bones. You're going to want app ball hockey. You're going to want Stratomatic hockey. You're going to want full simulators, right? But as I said before, I'm not even playing full simulator football games. The only full simulator football game I'm playing is my own BCF. Why? And ask yourself, what is the key? What is really the key for my full football sim that's so different from other full football sims? Well, there's speed. There's a dynamic yet simple chart. There is a simple rating system that directly affects the dice on the chart. And finally, there is low entropy, very low entropy, right? I'm not tracking injuries. We're not dealing with constant changes to the teams. The teams don't change until the off season, right? And so there is a little entropy happening, and you can finish my full game of football in 25 minutes, 26 minutes, all right, 35 if you're tracking stats, 45 minutes. If you want to track every snap of a game, it's definitely going to take you an hour and a half. Of course, I use possessions, so games can be over quickly, and I use short possessions for my league. But you have the choice of doing with longer possessions. You have the choice of tracking every snap of the game. It's entirely up to you. But it reduces entropy, right, from my side of the table, right? So anyway, I was looking at a solo war game I got. It's a World War II dogfighting game, and the game is contained in a book now. It used to be a tabletop game. So what's happened is there's some companies out there that are taking all these classic board games and they're putting them in books. So for those of you who don't know, you need to look for these. They're called, I think, Midland Games, and they literally are taking old tabletop war games that used to be maps with chips, and they literally are rewriting them and putting them in books. And you can photocopy and cut out the stuff, or some of them allow you to track things with a pencil, right? It's pencil gaming. But what's amazing about those, like this dogfight game, is I've got the fighter card that I can print out, or I can tear out of the book, or I could just transcribe onto my own notebook paper. And again, all we need to measure that is some kind of device. Like all I need is a token to measure my ammo left, a token to manage my fuel, and a token to manage my damage. The rules are contained in a simple card using playing cards to determine advantage and where planes are at on the grid. So we don't need a big map and very little entropy, right? So as I age, it is so nice to break a game out of that box, set it up clean and neat with a score sheet, and bang out these amazing games of hockey and put it away, right? And know that I'm still going to get all the assists and all the goals, and I'm going to get these amazing games of hockey self-contained. And there's just something very important to me at 55 about that, and I'm not certain why, but it is for me the future. Fast play for real history, for historic play, for revisiting the '83 Raiders or revisiting the '85 Bears season or playing out the 1958 schedule. It is these fast play, accurate games, game-winning drive football, drive time football, family football, right? And there are others, fast drive football, right? Fast drive football is a little more work than what I want to do. I mean, fast drive football, you get a little more depth, a little more detail, but it's more work than I want to do, right? Drive time football is the perfect fit. I don't have to transcribe. So game winning drive, I need to make that math adjustments and I got to transcribe the math over to the score sheet, right? For every game. That's setup time and that's work. And I gotta write in those little tiny boxes. And I don't have great handwriting and I'm a heavy-handed writer. I write in big blocky print. And that I stop and when I sit down to play game winning drive football, I go, yeah, right. So what could I do that doesn't, drive time football doesn't ask me to do any of that. Um, this is what John has done with his games, right? Um, so I would say a game changer for me, fifth on that Mount Rushmore, are powder blue sports style of games. And all I can say about that is congratulations, John. You have now ruined me for the future, right? So anyway, everybody out there have a wonderful week. Again, I've said it a million times and I'll say it again. Love what you do and do what you love. Whether that's hardcore replays, or whether that is ultra quick season tournaments with your favorite college teams, it doesn't make any difference. What matters is that you're doing this thing with dice and charts and with your imagination, and you're getting something from this. So, all right, everybody out there, have a good week. Bye bye.